I used to have fear of performing, or what we call performance anxiety. I think many of us do to some degree at least some point of our career. Some develop deep anxiety around the instrument, confirmed again and again by the physical shaky feeling before and while performing in front of an audience, even if it's in front of one person, especially after the onset of vocal dystonia. Some of us claim that they are emotionally hurt by their instrument, especially after an injury, since they can't play the instrument like they did before. They might consciously or subconsciously feel as though their instrument poses danger to them. So how to overcome performance anxiety? How to overcome the shaky feeling when performing? How to deal with the scary feeling that we have associated with playing the instrument? And perhaps you don't even feel the anxiety, but nevertheless, you feel shaky as though your body is fearing the instrument. The physical and emotional response to fear and anxiety that some of us have associated with playing the instrument tends to magnify with the onset of vocal dystonia in many cases that I've personally seen, including the case with myself. I think because this problem is physical and something that lays deep in our heart, we could find an approach that unifies our mind, body, and soul, especially when we are retraining from vocal dystonia. So before we get into the skill of turning things around, let's objectively see what is going on. I've found over time that the fear that you are feeling around the instrument does not represent the whole you. It's just one part of the brain that's doing its thing to help us survive as species. So you might have heard this 3-brain model that was suggested by an American neuroscientist and physician, Dr. Paul MacLean. He suggested that we have 3 brains operating as one, which makes a great deal of sense to me when we talk about the physical reaction to performing our instrument. So the 3 brains are the most primitive reactive reptilian brain, the emotional pleasure-seeking and danger-avoiding mammalian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex, the humane brain. The reptilian brain is the most ancient brain that we share with reptiles. Reptilian brain that stems in the base of the brain is the seat of our subconscious mind. This part of the brain regulates blood pressure, body temperature, and breathing, among other functions for basic survival, and it is responsible for the fight or flight physical response. If you're clumsy like me, as I pull out a roast chicken from the oven, sometimes accidentally touch the wall of the burning hot oven, I immediately retract my hand away from the oven as fast as possible in that split moment without thinking logically about it or having an emotional association with the oven. So this is what regulates the basic instinct for survival. I retract my hand as a reaction. I do not have any emotional association with the oven when I do this. So over the reptilian brain, there is a mammalian brain, which is the limbic system that regulates the chemical order of the body. This brain is shared with other mammals such as dogs and cats and responsible for seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. It wants to do whatever feels great at the moment and avoid anything that causes pain at the moment. So even when you know logically that you want to lose weight, you keep on eating ice cream and procrastinate going to the gym because ice cream gives you the temporary feel-good feeling, and the idea of going to the gym causes you a great amount of pain. We do a lot to seek pleasure, and we do also a lot to avoid pain. And then there is, on the surface, there is the human brain, or the neocortex, the so-called most evolved part of the brain. Neocortex is the seat of our conscious brain. It loves to absorb information and learn, and the right and left hemisphere of this neocortex hold different functionality, but basically this part of the brain is what makes you a musician. It makes you be creative, calculate, visualize, create things, logically construct ideas, and those other types of things that only humans are supposedly capable of doing. So let's think about your dystonic symptom for a moment. Say you are a pianist who have an index finger that retracts the moment you try to play something on the keyboard or when you get in contact with the keyboard. You can imagine it kind of resembles the motion of me retracting my whole arm from the hot burning oven. But this time, what is retracting visibly is just my finger. My finger is focally trying to distance itself from an immediate danger, the keyboard. It's almost as though my finger is trying to run away from what it perceives as a very, very dangerous thing. So over time, we have associated this physical response with our negative emotions. So we all know how this goes. My negative self-talk went on like this. Oh, I don't like that my hand is doing this. Every time this happens, I cannot play. Everything this happens, it ruins my performance and my mood, and therefore my ego is endangered. My whole self-image is destroyed because of this. This is really embarrassing. I hate how I play. I wish I could run away from this at all costs. I hate myself for having this, and so on and so forth. So a physical response has been embedded with these negative emotions. I personally have felt depressed, resentful, sad, and angry every time my hand and my finger tensed and lost control. Physical response that is associated with danger is easily coupled with negative emotions, since this is how we have survived as species all this time. Unfortunately, it is not serving us at our best interest in terms of being a musician with vocal dystonia in this modern age. So to give you an example on how it might have served us back in those wild days, say you're walking in the jungle and you come across a tiger. The first reaction that you're going to have is to tense up and freeze, so you have the most chance of the tiger not noticing you. Your heart rate is raised, and so is your blood pressure, so you could run away as fast as you can. Or in a worst case scenario, you pump a lot of blood in your muscles so you could fight the tiger with the most amount of strength you could possibly summon at that time. If you're lucky enough to escape that tiger, your emotional brain is going to associate that event, situation, and physical response as something fearful and to be anxious of. So you remember, and so you remember that feeling, so you could avoid the same kind of situation for your survival and the survival of your offsprings. The fear and anxiety around that event will help you avoid the same kind of environment to have a better chance of not encountering the tiger. Now, if you could replace that fight or flight response that we just had with the tiger to what you're having with the instrument, for some bizarre reason, our negative emotions are there to keep us reminding us that the instrument is something to fight or avoid for our survival. Our reptilian brain cannot tell the difference between a real life-threatening situation and what it has only perceived as a dangerous situation. Now, what if our body has, for one bizarre reason or the other, perceived the instrument as something that poses danger to our survival? It's not such a mystery that the dystonic reaction and our negative emotions and even those uncomfortable, scary feelings go hand in hand. Certainly, our dystonic reaction is very similar to the response that you get when you encounter a tiger in the jungle, and aside from that general physical response, in some place of the body it has been magnified. Our body has tried to remember this response as it might be a signal from our body to remember a dangerous situation. This is very much tied to our emotional response. So let's think of other scenarios where we musicians in general let our aggressive, territorial, defensive, concrete, and dominating reptilian brain take over their perception. Stage fright. We all have this to some degree or the other. But what really is a stage fright? I think it boils down to an emotional and physical response to fear of being judged, or a fear of not meeting up to your own expectation or other people's expectations. Even when there is no actual fear associated with the situation, if the performer is accustomed to associating and interpreting the reaction of excitement of performing, such as sweaty hands, shaky hands, short breath, as being in a fearful situation, he or she might carry on the habit of feeling fearful to performances because this is so ingrained in the memory as to how they have dealt with the situation before. And especially if they have had instances where there were cases of physical response paired with overwhelming emotions. Your mind and the body remembers it to protect you from similar situation down the road. On another note, a musician might practice and perform to try to impress an audience or tries to conquer and dominate the perceived audience, or perceive the instrument as something that they have to conquer or dominate in order to feel worthiness. He might also feel the other side of the equation of being dominated as well. In some instances, instead of you sharing and communicating the work of art, you might subconsciously feel being dominated by the audience. And no wonder you have fear and anxiety towards those situations. It's not such a mystery, again, to be fearful on stage, even though your logical human brain knows that it is a situation that you shouldn't be so afraid of. You see, a lot of times we let our reptilian and emotional brain take over our mind. So let's start talking about possible solutions to all of this. We want ourselves to react differently. We want to stay present, create, and communicate. We need to get our artist human brain start communicating to our mammalian and reptilian brain so that we could start making different decisions when reacting to different situations. Now, I think the intention is everything when we make a decision. Intention is the highest order of things. We must revamp the intention of what it means to play the instrument. We want to revamp the idea that your instrument is actually a medium you could channel with your highest artist within yourself, and you are so eager to share your gift with the rest of the world, or whatever the real reason is that you want to play your instrument. Now, when you are clear with your intentions, you can now start practicing being the observer and not the participator. The technique that I've stumbled upon, even without knowing what I was doing, is what I now call a neutralized vision. A neutralized vision is where I could vividly see in my mind myself playing freely, smoothly, and effortlessly, and while feeling neutral. My emotions are neutral. I don't feel anxious or negative or even ecstatic or happy. I feel neutral, calm, all whilst I can observe and see myself playing effortlessly on the piano in my mind. The key is to be able to see and feel it clearly in your head, so you might want to spend a lot of time trying to define the vision of yourself playing effortlessly. Once I decided on what my neutralized vision was, then I practiced getting back to that vision whenever I felt like my physical and emotional responses taking over around the instrument. I heard that the human brain communicates very poorly with our mammalian and reptilian brain. We communicate stronger from the right hemisphere, which is responsible for abstract thinking, imagery, visualizing, and pictures. And thus, it is very effective when we visualize with pictures and imagery coupled with neutral feeling. How many times have we told ourselves, hey, it's not a big deal, don't get nervous, or don't shake, it's not like I'm so afraid of this, but without any result. See, words itself don't mean much. Vision and imagery does. We like to have the artistic, creative, and logical humane brain govern the emotional and reactive brain, but it's quite my observation with my own life that I've had this backwards a lot of times. A lot of times we have our emotional and reactive brain take over the human brain. When I'm highly emotional or angry, my logics are completely shut down. My heart is pumped, my body gesture is rigid, feeling defensive, and I say things that I regret later. We let our emotions and physical response take over our artistic brain. We just have to practice tuning into our artistic brain when there are feelings of fear or physical reaction to fear. Now, the funny thing is, you might have worked your way around fear and you don't really actually feel fearful around your instrument or performing any longer. But since your reptilian brain have associated your instrument as something that you have to feel shaky around because that's how you've remembered it, you still will have that shaky feeling long after you got rid of the fear. So let's try to identify when this happens and just simply acknowledge that it is happening. Breathe. Find a moment to see that neutralized vision of yourself playing freely and see that you are calm, and then go on. And you will come back to this zone as often as you have different reactions. Don't give up. I think this is precisely the technique that I've used while retraining as well, while breaking down the movement into smallest increments and working from the most subtle stimuli, or when I'm making my body move, I come across that uncomfortable feeling of the dystonic reaction lurking in the back of my head. I would pause and go back to this neutralized vision until the feeling and the physical sensation calms down. I have practiced this over and over again. The vision must be there with the neutral feeling. The funny thing about what happened to me was that over time, as I worked on the dystonic reaction with the neutralized vision, my performance anxiety slowly and surely vanished. I still get very nervous when I perform, even though it doesn't look like it from other eyes. I'm not anxious any longer. I don't have that fearful feeling. So I'd say practice. Practice being in that calm state of vision precisely when your emotions and reactions set in. Our brain is an energy conserving organ, so we'll do everything to talk you out of doing anything different than the current state. So if you got used to being fearful around your instrument, it will try to do anything to keep you in that state because it requires precious energy to change that around. But we have the power to convince our brain otherwise. We can navigate away from the current default state. We can set intentions and then practice not to make decisions to react emotionally, physically, or dystonically. Instead of participating in the dystonic reaction and the emotional turmoil around it, we can practice being the observer of all of this. Talking to your emotional and reptilian brain is something that requires a bit of stepping out of the picture that you are putting yourself in. It might take you a while to pause and reframe, but I promise it gets easier and easier over time. My final word is, whatever situation you are in, you might feel stuck. And you might feel like you can't find ways around it. But your artist self has the power to get you moving in the direction you set your intentions to, which will get you through the practice. So let me know what your experience is and comment and shower me with more questions.